is the one quality a writer must display in an interview to get hired?
I mean, there's so many things, but I think what's really important, and I think about jobs that I didn't get, you should really like the show that you're up for.
Welcome to Third and Fairfax, the official podcast of the Writers Guild of America West. I'm your host, Brian Gary. In our latest episode, Jonterri Gadson talks with the writing team of Susanna Fogel and David Iserson about creating their spy thriller series, Ponies. They talk about balancing tone, their collaborative process, and much more. Listen and subscribe to Third and Fairfax on Spotify, Apple, or Libsyn, and watch us on the Writers Guild of America West's YouTube channel. And now, here's Jonterri in conversation with Susanna and David.
I'm Jonterri Gadson, and today we're talking about Ponies, a spy thriller TV series. It's a spy thriller set in 1977 Moscow, where two widows become spies after their husbands are killed under mysterious circumstances. It's a great watch. And I'm so excited to be joined by the creators and showrunners, Susanna Fogel and David Iserson.
Hi.
So I gave like a very brief overview. How do you describe Ponies when you talk about it?
I mean, you got real close. I mean, it really kind of depends. You know, it's, I think that the things that I think were most appealing to us when we were thinking about the show is setting it in a time period, telling a story about in this very heightened time in American history, in this very, very high stakes place, but about two women who didn't think they would find themselves in this situation, were just kind of trying to take control of their lives after their lives changed so drastically. So, you know, I think the piece of it that is about the characters and the setting and the time, you know, which you all introduced it with, is really the pieces that appeal most to us.
Okay, so let's just start off with like the origins and the development. And I read that the series was born out of a desire to turn the film, The Spy Who Dumped Me, into a TV series. Like that's where it started, but this isn't like based on that.
No, I wouldn't say that that's true.
Oh, it's
No,
not true.
I mean, no.
It wasn't our desire to turn it into a show. Others
Okay.
had the desire to turn.
Got it,
Others
yeah.
had the desire. It was based on their desire, and we were like, we have a desire to explore spy stuff and female friendships, but we didn't want to do something as broadly comedic. So, but we used the sort of interest in that kind of thing as a jumping off point to do a version of it that felt like a different version of the story for us, a different tone and all of that. So yeah, we sort of pivoted like off the back of that. And then years and years later, because it takes that long to get anything made in Hollywood, sometimes here we are with something that, you know, it came from a long time ago, but it's become something quite different.
Yeah, and could you talk a little bit in more detail about what that development process is like? Because it's amazing to see something like come out of it and make it to air and be successful. How did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think it sort of began. I think, yeah, where it first sort of began in the development stage. I mean, Susanna and I started talking about this, the very inception of this idea, probably like at the earliest points in our friendship when we first met and started like talking about working together, which was probably, I don't know, like 2015, 2016. I think we just talked about this notion of this idea of, I think it began talking about one woman, and then we talked about two women in the 70s in Moscow, whose husbands died, and they started working for the CIA. So I think that was just like kind of like the one sentence idea that we had like in this pile of ideas. And Susanna had a general meeting at Network that doesn't exist anymore, that where she'd mentioned that notion of the idea, and they were excited enough about that idea that they optioned it or purchased it or whatever you would call it, for something that they bought and then gave back when that network folded. But we sort of developed it from there and like wrote some scripts, and then, you know, we had we had a script, we had we had a structure for multiple seasons of this show. We had a lot of visual ideas for it, and then we didn't have a home for it anymore. So we went out and pitched it, and um, Peacock bit, and we started developing it for them. And between like, I mean, it just went through so many permutations of the world, like between like COVID and then writer strikes and whatever, like it was a lot of like false starts. But by the time we opened a writer's room, which was like now, I guess like a year and a half ago or so, we had a whole bunch of scripts, and we really had worked out a lot of that first season. And then we wrote the rest with the help of our very smart, capable writer's room.
Nice.
I wanted to add that Dave is the showrunner. Dave ran the room. We co-created the show. It's sort of a weird situation because we all wear multiple hats, but not the normal hats that one would wear in a TV show. Usually I come in and I direct other people's shows, or if you're the writer, you're the showrunner, and then you're sort of there the whole time. But I was sort of, we shared the responsibilities basically. Different ways.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to ask about, is the division of labor, because I was I know that Susanna, you also direct, and so then Dave, you ran the writer's room and then in production. Like, how exactly how are you making those decisions on how you divide the labor between you?
Well, Susanna has always been the director of our writing relationship. So there was never a question of who of the two of us was going to direct the show. So I think we started with that division of labor, which was helpful.
I think, in terms of like the room, I think, we had written, as David said, like we had written a handful of scripts over the years together. So we had a real significant head start, but the question came down to, like, even though we don't have that many scripts left to do, inevitably we're going to get separated at some point. I'll be sent off to Eastern Europe to start prepping the show, and then it'll be harder and harder to like kind of collaborate on things. And so we wanted to set him up with like a fully functioning room that would be able to support him. And luckily we did have the scripts done by the time we were shooting, even though they continued to evolve a bit in production. But it was interesting for me just because I've done films and TV, and on every project there's my role is different. In a film, it's like a director's medium much more than TV. So if I'm the director, the writer is usually not on the set. I'm sort of the king of the set. And in most shows, the writer, where I'm the director, not the writer, like whoever wrote the show is my boss, and I'm there directing their thing because they're going to outlive and outlast me on the show. So this was a mix. Like we were lucky that we'd both been there at the inception of it, so that when we were like tagging in and tagging out, we had more of a shorthand than most showrunners and directors would when the director just kind of drops in. But yeah, it was interesting. I mean, I think that we were split up all the time, just because inevitably if I was on the set, David was like looking ahead to the next block of episodes, but also wanting to sort of like be there too. So luckily, if we had to be split up, we had this shorthand about what the show was, and there wasn't a lot of crossfires there. But it was a lot. It was, we needed even more bodies.
Yeah,
to just,
making a show, I think, you go in with all of the best intentions and all of the best laid plans, and I think we were, as prepared as on any show that I've been a part of, like having all the scripts done, really having a real clarity on what we wanted to do. And still there was only, still both of us can only be in one place at one time. And there were so many times where we just found ourselves like, both kind of running around the city where we were shooting in Budapest, and just, going from place to place where we needed to be. And, we would have other directors in for their blocks, and there would be times when we'd need to be, different. Both of us would need to be available for editing, and I would be prepping the next block, and then there was shooting a block, and there's more than can possibly happen, and you kind of finish it and have this sort of marathon, and you sort of can't believe that somehow it all happened, because it's very chaotic in probably every way in any version of a production, making a show, making a movie, making anything. It's you're kind of running a small city.
Yeah. I will say, like, this is such an obvious thing to say, but for me, the hardest part was how many time zones were involved in every decision, just because it kind of makes you have to be on a 24-hour schedule, which I know,
wow.
like running or directing a show, it's production always is that kind of. But when you have people in LA that are like, well, we're in the office at 10 o'clock, that's like you're sort of never not susceptible to having to sort of be in work mode. So it was really helpful having just both of us able to sort of be on call, because if one person had to take a minute to, you know, sleep or be with their children in David's case or whatever, it's like the other person could be there. But it was even more than a typical like set environment. It was rough. There was never a moment when it wasn't work hours for somebody involved in the show.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate hearing those insights, because that's not something I would have even considered.
Yeah.
I want to back up just a little, just because this is a podcast for writers, and we're all wanting to know like all the tips on pitching. So can you talk about how you prepare to pitch in general, and then some specifics on maybe this show?
I've pitched every way, and I'm still sort of like trying to figure out what the best way to do. You sometimes, like when you've written a script and you are also pitching the show, I've done it where you pitch the show and then you hand them the script at the end of the pitch. And I think with this one, people had read the script before, and then we were going in and saying, like, now that you've read it, here's a reminder of what happened in it, but also here is the rest of the season and then multiple seasons. I think that, I think I said this on another podcast, because I do sort of feel a little cynical about it, but like, I think pitching is a little bit of a scam. It's just like you are telling people this is what the show is going to be. Wink, wink, believe me. I promise you this is what it's going to be. And everyone has their own idea of it in their head. But like, it's, writing a script, having it written down is to me the best way to convey tone. And when you're pitching tone, it, you do tend to lean more to comparing it to other shows, which is something we really didn't want to do. I mean, this is not like patting ourselves in the back too much, but I do think that like tonally we are trying something with the show that just isn't exactly what other things on television are right now. We are trying, we have like real danger in it, but we have humor in it, and and it's a show about women, but we want to also appeal to men, and so there's this like this sort of strange push-pull that we're trying to do something else. So it's not very useful to say, and it is like these 5 other shows, because that is not something that we're trying to do. So we are just kind of doing our best to say, hey, this is kind of who we are. This is what our voices are. This should be kind of what the show is. It's very helpful to pitch with somebody else. And, I think both Susanna and I have both have performed in our lives. So like, I mean, we're not actors, but we, Susanna had a web series and I've done improv. And so like, we don't necessarily shrink in front of a camera. So that is very helpful. And, the few times I've seen other writers pitch, and some writers are just very, very nervous pitchers. And earlier in my career, I was a very nervous pitcher. And I think it is unfair to judge writers that way, because it has nothing to do with what is on the page. But, a buyer does really want to see your self-assuredness, your confidence. Like if they feel at ease with you and you are at ease with your idea, then they will be more likely to feel like they want to step behind you. The other thing that is, I think, part of what is the scam of pitching, but the thing that I think I've gotten better at, and Susanna, I imagine you have gotten better at, which is that like, I feel like we can answer any question in a pitch, whether we know the answer or not. Like when sometimes if you were asking us in real life, like, hey, like, what do you think, like, in season 3 of this show that you just pitched us, maybe like a mid-season, you said this one thing, what do you think is, and then they ask 9 more questions about it. And I think in real life, we'd be like, I don't know, we figured it out later, but I think we can like BS our way into an answer in any pitch. And I think that's just experience and doing it enough times. And I think that like helps us in the end. I don't know that
I also
makes you a better writer.
I also think that does tie back to your improv background. If you could just yes and
probably.
Anyway. Yeah, totally. I think for this particular show, I think a big thing for us in the pitch process, and the benefit of having just because we were between the two of us, both the writers and the director of it, we knew what we wanted the visuals to be, and that was going to be part of the hook of selling it too. It was a way to talk about tone without talking about tone, just rather than describing what's funny or describing what's emotional, which is the least funny and emotional thing you could possibly do. We walked in with a deck of costumes and production ideas that were very vibrant, very colorful. We're like, look, fun show, fun spy show. We kind of wanted people to see that, even if we were pitching it more dramatically, we wanted them to know that we saw it as a poppy thing and not dreary and not homeworky and not too dry. So I think the visual deck for this particular show, and for any show that because I've pitched every which way also, and for shows that have a very strong aesthetic idea, it's really useful to bring a deck in. And then there's certain shows where it kind of doesn't matter. It's not really what the show's doing, or it's a comedy where it's really about the performances. And I think those are harder. They rely a lot more on just the verbal pitch. But for this, I think we were aided a lot in that process by just having some visuals to show them what version of the show we wanted to make too.
Yeah, and you guys brought up tone, and that's something that stood out to me. Putting together a show with such a variety in the tone, that's also servicing so many characters and with double lives.
Yeah. I mean, I can speak somewhat abstractly, and then Dave, David was more in the nuts and bolts of breaking the stories in the room, but from my perspective, just in terms of how we approach the show, because we've written a lot of character-driven material, whether it's we've between the two of us, we've done everything from pure comedy to to drama, and I think what unites all of the content that we've worked on really is that it's character driven. It's about there's plot obviously, but we're sort of interested in going home with the people at the end of the day too. And so for this show, part of the sort of idea of the show was most spy shows are not going to take you into the apartment of the spy where they do something really banal and talk to their parents or their boyfriends, or where it's really about how the spy world is changing them as people, and how what they're up against is sort of helping their identities evolve just as much as we're watching the plot. So for us, it was just important to figure out the emotional arcs and to make each character in The Office, for instance, interesting enough that if this were just a show about an office, you'd have plenty to play with Cheryl and Shep. You could do little subplots that are just in a Greg Daniels show, but instead we're that exists, so we can always use those tools and have them interweave with these high stakes operations. So I think just trying to use the skills we'd apply to any writer's room about an ensemble cast, even though it really is the girl story, helped that. And if somebody's going to show up and have a line or be part of a plot, and we want to sort of have them be specific enough that it's an opportunity for an actor to pop, but also it feels like it's not just your average show where it's just a bunch of faceless guys in suits moving along the main character's trajectory through a high stakes event. Anyway, Dave, you can speak to that more, but that was important.
Yeah, no, I think it's it covers the kind of duality of what we're trying to do in on two sides. We do. I think everything feels richer if we care about these people and we care about their lives. And I think also, and I think this is just a consequence of working on the show so long, and I think both having lots of television and film that we've developed that we've truly loved, that never saw the light of day, that when we're making something and we are lucky enough to make it and know that we're making something to go out in the world, we also just want to have as much going on as possible. I mean, I think that it would feel so such a waste of all of our time and energy, and to have this opportunity to tell this story and then have scene after scene of characters kind of equivocating whether they should go from point A to point B. Instead, we want to tell a lot of story, and we and I think everything feels more rich because we really love these characters, we really love these people, and we want to understand their experiences through the prism of their personalities. But also, we did a screening last night of the pilot, and so I've was sitting watching the pilot with an audience for the 700th time. But I was like, you know what, there, I'm always, you know, I'm never sitting impatiently, like wondering when this next scene is going to happen. And that was sort of like the goal of it. And I think that's the goal of all of our scenes. Like we're just like every scene feels worthy. Every scene feels like there's something interesting happening. And if there isn't, like we either cut it or we rewrote it.
Yeah. Also, just to add to that, like a rule of thumb I had with a previous writing partner that I sort of started my career with was that like we'd outlines together and then we'd split up the scenes, and David and I do that too. And our rule was like we'd each sort of be like, oh, I want that one, or oh, you know, oh, you're gonna take that one, and we would get excited about scenes we wanted to write the first draft of. And if there was a scene that we were both like, no, you can have that, that's you take that one. You can write the deathbed scene. No, that's okay. I don't want to do that one. Then we were like, there's probably something broken in the scene. Like maybe that scene needs to just come out of the outline, and let's try to find a creative way to not do it. And I think David and I have sort of done a version of that too. But it's great if you can catch that before.
Yeah, I had this very similar. Like this was like in like one of the first scripts I ever wrote. You know, the way I did it was like I would lay in bed the night before and I would just be like, what would be the most fun thing to do tomorrow? Like thinking about like where I needed to go in the story, but like kind of like, you know, just figuring out what needs to happen in the next 10 pages of the script. And then just like, what would be the most fun way to execute those things that would just keep me interested, that would keep me motivated, that would make me like want to wake up and actually like get to work, because I'm so excited because I get to write this like weird, fun, funny scene. And, you know, I think that has sort of like stayed true to my process and my Susanna's process ever since then. That like, you know, if it's fun to write, it's fun to watch, and you know, if it's emotional to write, it's emotional to watch, like all of those, you know, but your experience executing it, you know, best case should also be the experience of the audience taking it in.
That answer, thank you. There were so many gems and great perspectives in
good.
the answers. I was just like, oh my gosh, like so much.
Good.
Like I love the idea of, you know, this, you're getting to make a show, like make every scene count, do as much as you can, and that's all very clear. And yes, thank you for sharing that. I had questions because I'm a fan of like these type of like more mystery, like the spy genre, and so to me it's almost like magic. So I wonder if you could like take us behind the scenes, like how, a little bit, like not giving away too much, but how are you like planning, like how the story unfolds, what's revealed when, like is there some sort of like formula or something, and how did you learn to write this genre?
I mean, I've written for a few shows that like had, you know, and we've both written movies that you know, that had some mystery elements to it. And I wrote for Mr. Robot, which was like a big like twisty plot thing. And I remember a big part of the writer's room there was like what episode this thing gets revealed, and like those would be sort of hotly debated topics, like does this get revealed first or does this get revealed second or whatever. And I think that was really interesting to learn. I don't think there is a rule. I think it is a little bit feel. I mean, I think some of it is just like you're just like, oh, well, someone's got to give away something here, someone's got to find out something. And you know, it's helpful. Like we put together a writer's room, you know. I've talked about this before, but like I've been in rooms where like they hire like different people with different expertise on different things. Like we're doing a mystery show, but it has comedy, so let's hire one comedy writer and one mystery writer. And I do find that doesn't really work. You know, I think ideally you want to find somebody who can do all sorts of things. But and I think that was a lot of the makeup of our room, people who had ability to kind of execute a lot of the different aspects of our show. But what was interesting is all of their brains did that in a different way. All of their brains work differently. So like one of our writers, Jordan Riggs, you know, he would make this like very, very complicated like graph on the whiteboard of like who knew what when, and what piece of information is out there, what questions need to be answered. And it was not something I would ever think to do, but it was a great way to visually just kind of look at it, because sometimes when you're kind of going by feel and you're just sort of, like we know what all the answers are. We know who did what, we know what the secrets are, but we don't necessarily know when we want everyone to know these things. So being able to kind of just look at it and just say like, oh yeah, I don't want to forget that we've laid this out in episode 2, this little clue that, like, I don't want to keep kicking it down the road too much. We also, you also want to respect the audience and not feel like they want to be toyed around too much. I mean, I've definitely watched shows where you're spending episode after episode like following a trail, and then you find out that is just like leading you nowhere, and it was just, and I think I think you can only get to a few attempts at that before the audience starts getting frustrated. So it is this sort of combination of thinking it through and having some technique to it, and then also just like it almost just sort of feels like music, like you just kind of know when it's going to turn, and you should know when you should know something.
Nice. I imagined that's what it was always, is that there's always this big graph, there's all this plotting, but you're like, I would have never thought to do it that way.
But oh, sorry, you go first.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that, like, when David and I were writing, we were writing a couple of backup scripts. This is when we were like hovering on the brink of a pickup, but we didn't yet have the room, but we were like, let's just keep going ourselves. The way that we started was, I mean, I find it's always sort of like a rule of thumb, but like you start really big, like, let's just get on the phone tomorrow and make a list of things that we think would be cool, like them on the don't worry about if they work, how they work, what the connective tissue is. Blue like sky. What's a thing, yeah, like what's a thing you read in what's a thing we read in $1 Billion Spy that seemed like it would be, there's a cool version of that we could do, or what's a thing we watched in like a movie that is not a spy movie, that let's have a moment where the friends this or that, or we both have Jewish grandmas, what if the Jewish grandma comes and help, whatever, like we're sort of like, from our lives, from content, like what are we listening to, watching, and just making just a laundry list of ideas. And some of them just keep getting booted to the next season, next episode, and they're like on a list for later. But if you kind of have the sense of those and you're like organizing them in an order that you think they could work, and then you just get more and more and more and more granular, and then when you have the room, you just continue to make it even more of a tiny grain of sand within that. But I think that, like, the more expansive you can be without thinking about production or why needing things to make sense, the more inspired you are at the outset, and then all of the hard, exhausting work comes later. But like the kernel of inspiration, I think, is it does come from just like giving yourself the space, sometimes like leaving your computer at home and taking a notebook to a restaurant, and just not like instantly trying to put it into action in the right format or the right way, but just letting yourself like remember the part of your brain that just like wanted to have ideas, and doesn't matter what it means. So I don't know, like I'm in a phase now where I'm like getting back to wanting to start projects that way. You get into a routine where you're like, you can get cynical about it, the instant you have an idea, you're trying to push it into exactly the right container. But I think with this show, and it was best when we would like let ourselves start kind of, there were macro ideas on that list, and then extremely micro details, anecdotes, and oddities that we wanted to put in. And like the Elton John concert, we were like, we gotta have that in there. And then we kind of knew early on, we're like, oh yeah, it should culminate at the Elton John concert. It's sort of like the perfect place for like all of the things. It's sort of ironic that it's there, but there's gonna be action, but there's gonna be, and we didn't totally know all the moves that would lead us there, but we had that in there even before we knew what would happen in like episode 5, So it's a mix. I think you just end up getting smaller and smaller and smaller until you've got every scene worked out. And that's kind of the job of the room to figure out, I think.
I want to talk about the ending without spoiling anything. The thing road noise. The thing about
I'm just glad that the road noise isn't coming from me, the New Yorker, in the room here. This is really good. It's always like there's sirens. They're not coming from here. It's dead quiet in New York today for some reason.
Probably because there's like snow everywhere. But
yeah, that's probably right.
Okay. So to me, and again, without spoiling anything, it's almost like the ending makes season 2 inevitable. And it's like when I couldn't see any evidence that you guys were just like a multiple season order. So can you talk about how you negotiated that? Like, because you have to have a season 2.
Yeah, I mean,
we're trying to put pressure on them with our cliffhangers to have a season 2. That's our only power.
Yeah, I mean, I think to us, I mean, I think that's just television. Yeah, I mean, there's no guarantees for multiple seasons, but we're making a thriller. We're making an espionage show. Every episode that we made ended with a cliffhanger. I think it would have been against the very ethos of the show to not end this season with a cliffhanger. You know, so yes, that would mean that we are putting ourselves in a position where we, you know, where we would leave an audience feeling pretty let down if we don't get a second season. Believe me, we would feel pretty let down too. But I don't know any other way to do it. Like we need to tell a thrilling story with the characters in a complicated plate at the end, and so we just had to do it that way, and you know, with a second season, you know, then that draws the audience back in, and without a second season, like, God, I mean, I guess you should call your call Peacock and beg them, because yeah, that would be really bad if that's how the show ended.
Also, you're saying
I have to say, like,
oh, sorry, Susanna.
Oh, no, you first.
I was just pointing out, you're saying cliffhanger singular when
oh, cliffhangers. No, I'm saying ending an episode in a cliffhanger. Yes, with multiple storylines, with, you know, with big gasps to it. But like, yeah, I'm just using it in the singular sense that there is that the cliffhanger is how the ending would be defined. Yeah.
I just wanted to emphasize how.
Yes, multiple
how cliffy it is.
Yeah.
Yes,
multiple hanging of cliffs. Yeah.
Sorry, Susanna, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that, like, without spoilers, but as a sort of a heads up about process, for those who watch the whole show and then possibly remember what I say now, which will not include a spoiler. There was, even though we had all the scripts written, as we built toward the finale, which I directed and which I was already prepping by the time these conversations came up, there were a couple moments where David had an idea that was a tweak on something that existed already. And at first I was really resistant to it because I was in like director mode, and I was like, no, we already prepped this thing. Like, why are you disrupting the plan? Like, we can't deviate from this plan. I'm now in this mode, like, let it be. But ultimately, we shifted the way that two of the cliffhangers play out was mid prep, like just a layer, always trying to make things better, and like, let's just keep pushing it. And so I think the layer that we added to both cliffhangers, which can be, you know, cross-referenced with whatever, I'm sure we talk about it in some spoiler-filled other interview if people are curious what happened when. But my point was, like, we added a layer to each one that I think generates so much more story for season 2 than what we had before. Like, what we had before was definitely like a perfectly respectable cliffhangery end of a season, but there was like an additional like turn of the screw that I think like really made it sort of generate a lot of ideas for us. Like, oh my God, and then this could happen, and then he's going to be in that position, and she's going to be there, and oh my God, like, then she's going to have to deal with that. Like, you know, it's sort of like, it got us really excited just thinking about the possibilities for story, but those weren't always layers that existed like in our grand plan. So I think the flexibility, it just like, for writers who are getting things made and working with directors and sort of feeling guilty about maybe asking them to change part of the plan. It is totally annoying to a director when the writer's like, you got to change something, but sometimes it's really for the best. And I don't know, I went through the Sundance Screenwriters Lab, and one thing that they said is like, you're never done working on something. They just take it away from you at a certain point. And I thought that was apt, you know, like you're never done like tweaking a thing. You know, it's just at a certain point, like, it's too late. So to always kind of keep your brain active, and like interrogating things is helpful, not to the point of madness, but just like ask yourself, is this as interesting as it could be? Like whenever you can, even when it feels like it might be too late. Maybe it's not.
More great advice. So we're all union members of the WGA, and so I just want to ask, what does being part of a union mean to you guys?
Oh, I mean, I remember when I joined the WGA, I mean, it meant everything. It meant that, this thing that felt out of reach I was a part of something. I was part of a community. I mean, um, you know, we have both been in the WGA long enough that we've experienced two strikes, and and but you come out of that feeling really happy that you have this community. I mean, there's nothing I love more than um, talking about writing, being around other writers. It is such a particular, specific job that is hard for anybody else to understand, and so the idea that this thing that you sometimes do alone in a dark room can be something that you can share with other people who have been through it is just such a gift.
I mean, the easiest answer is like, to me, it means health insurance, but it also means other things. I think, yeah, I joined the Writers Guild right before the first strike. Like that's right when my career started to facilitate me quitting my temp job and becoming a real writer. And then suddenly I was striking, and it was a really interesting time because I'd never been part of a union before, and it was it was very inconvenient for me to suddenly not be able to like earn. I didn't have enough of a career ramping up to really be striking comfortably at all. um, and I remember feeling like, okay, this I gotta believe this is for the best, and this whole internet thing might turn out to be a really big issue in our world, so may as well like assume that streaming is here to stay and whatever. But it was very abstract at the time. But the experience of meeting other writers, which like Dave said, like most of the time you're doing it yourself, and you're not necessarily interacting with that many people unless you push yourself to. But then when you do interact with other writers, especially when you're, whether it's on the picket line, which is where I met people that I still know today, or writers getting together at events, it's how you make friendships that lead to partnerships that lead to writing jobs too. Like it's like the good spin on networking. Like I think it's just like meeting people you're like-minded with, and then eventually you end up working together. Like David and I met at a dinner party of writers that we both knew, and we started out just writing side by side in cafes because we're like, oh great, I could really use the structure. And then we'd go to lunch and talk about what we were working on. And when you discover like a like-minded person, in a casual, low pressure, like social situation, it can lead to like a really fruitful, enduring partnership. Anyway, which is just to say that like a lot of that started for me when I joined the Guild, just because I started mostly because I was picketing with people for hours a day and bonding with them and avoiding ex-boyfriends on the picket line. But it was I have some stories about that. The smallest picket line was at Prospect Studios, and it was the worst place to be stuck with an ex-boyfriend because you're walking in the smallest circle and you're like, hey, what's up? Hey, hi, 6 other people here. How's it going? Why did you pick this shift? Anyway, yeah, so union, great. It's been fun.
Great, thank you. Okay, so now we just have some quick questions we're going to wrap up with, that we just ask everyone. So
Okay.
what is the one quality a writer must display in an interview to get hired?
I mean, there's so many things, but I think what's really important, and I think about jobs that I didn't get, you should really like the show that you're up for.
I would say, I mean, it's sort of related, but I would just say positivity. Like, I mean, like I said, like David really like was on the front lines of staffing the room, and I was sort of more on the sidelines reading scripts, and so in terms of like creating an ecosystem of a writer's room, he could speak to that more. But I think when I interview crew members for any job, on set or otherwise, or even when I meet with writers to as a producer producing them, like a sense of like generative energy and positivity, even if it comes with critiques, because you also want someone who's going to like push back and interrogate things about the show that they want to, you know, try to improve. Just a sense of positivity is like really important. It's so hard because like everyone that's meeting, or a lot of people that are meeting you for a job are so desperate to get any job in this insane time. So like it's hard to be like, I'm just so excited, whatever happens, and really mean it. But I think there's something infectious about like positive energy, you know. So if that's something that you have to fake, just if you got to go for a run so you have an endorphin high when you walk in the meeting, whatever, like you're hanging out with these people all day for many hours. And if it's a person who's sort of just like shoots stuff down and brings the things into a negativity spiral and is going to complain about their lunch order and whatever, it's like, ugh, it's like life's too short. So positive energy.
Thank you. Okay, so what's the best way for a new staff writer to get asked back?
It's a hard answer, but and I think about, and not every staff writer gets the opportunity to write a script, but unfortunately, as good as you are in the room, as much as everyone loves having you around, and I'm only speaking of my own experience as a staff writer, I'm not talking about other people, your ability to execute on your draft is going to be the most important piece. And it's so hard because you're under so much pressure and so many stakes, and you have to understand that like no one's expecting your first television script to be perfect, you know. But you are going to be able to prove yourself much more on the page than anything else that you're going to do in the room.
What works every time for you to get rid of writer's block?
Fear. Like fear of being broke.
Oh my God, what works every time? I don't know that anything works every time. I don't know. I think for me, sometimes unplugging a little bit and taking a walk with a creative person, like a friend, whether or not they're another writer, can really like open things up. Talking to people about their work, like actually reading other people's stuff or talking to someone else about a story problem that they're having that isn't your problem, I think can just like get you feeling like a little more confident. Like after a really like creatively fallow period, if you're talking to somebody and they're like, I can't figure this out, and then you get to be the hero who like has an idea for their thing, it can just bring back a little bit of that like oomph that you needed. That sometimes works. I also think just this is maybe like a vestige of a younger version of me as a writer, but I would always find that if I watched something really bad, I would get just a boost of just confidence. I'm like, that got made. Like, if that person can have a career, like, you know, it just would make me feel like, oh my God, I can do that. And then some, please. That did give me energy earlier on when I was really down on myself. But now I can tolerate looking at good material and not it won't send me into a state of depression.
And I would argue, I also would get that burst when you see something really great, when you're just like, that's inspiring, that's exciting. It makes me just like want to run upstairs to the, and try to, like touch greatness as well.
What about, so then related to that, what's one script you wish you had written that somebody else wrote?
Election. I think I saw that right when I kind of decided this is what I wanted to do. And it was just, because I think sometimes, around that time I would see a movie that like I thought was great, and I was, and it might be discouraging that it was like, oh, that's just so out of reach. But there was something about it that felt like it was close to my voice and close to my experience, but it was so masterfully done that I was just like, oh, I think that if I got better and I got more experienced, like I could write something like this. Like it seemed like it was something that like I could have come up with, and with a lot of experience, like I could have written. I mean, and it was such a great version and a perfect version of it, but it sort of still felt like it was and it was, you know, because I was still not too far off high school, so it was like it was close to my experience, and but it was so masterfully done, so it felt like it was something that that was just in the realm of possibility.
I mean, this is such an obvious one. I'm sure everyone says this, but When Harry Met Sally probably is one. It's just it's just perfect version of itself. So yeah, that great dialogue, great, like just in the sort of like warm, funny, real, thought-provoking, philosophical stew of things that I like to bring into my writing. It kind of does all the things that I like.
Well, thank you both so much for your generosity and sharing tips and the experience and giving us like a behind the scenes look at Ponies, which I think it's just such a smart, emotionally grounded by like part of the spy genre now, and it's been great getting to hear how much care and craft went into like creating Bia and Twyla's world. Not Bia. Is it just B? B. Sorry. So thank you everyone for listening. If you haven't seen it yet, Ponies is streaming now on Peacock, and it's absolutely worth your time. Let's talk about the finale in person. So I'm Jonterri Gadson, and this has been the Third and Fairfax podcast. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonterri.
Thanks, Jonterri.
All right.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Third and Fairfax. You can listen and subscribe to Third and Fairfax on Spotify, Apple, and Libsyn, and watch us on the Writers Guild of America West's YouTube channel. Also check out writtenby.com, the Guild's online publication, for more on writer craft, career, and union life. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.